Presentable Liberty is the story of a man suffering from being alone. A story-oriented adventure game that was developed and published by Robert Brock, known by the online alias Wordpole. Presentable Liberty has you play as an unnamed main character, imprisoned for a reason which you are never told, as they receive letters from various other characters that help to build the story of the world outside of their cell. While an incredibly simple game in all aspects, from the blocky 3D graphics to the near featureless gameplay, the story that is able to be told through brief letters is the true star of the show. Presentable Liberty was and still is a masterpiece, and it is one which I believe is still very much worth looking back at and playing today. Throughout this video, I will be taking you all through what a full playthrough of the game entails, followed by an analysis of the overarching story, atmosphere, as well as the thematic and gameplay elements that are present in the game, followed up by a tribute to the game's creator. But, for the time being, I invite you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy as we take a deep dive into Menagerie 2, Presentable Liberty. As mentioned before, gameplay-wise, Presentable Liberty gives the player barely a handful of things to do every day, save for waiting and reading letters. The player is eventually given more options, but reduced to its bare elements, the gameplay loop is nothing more than simply waiting and reading letters. And in this section of the video, I will be going over each and every letter you are sent throughout the entirety of the game, as each day you receive different letters, presents, and things to do from the characters. So, let's start with day 1. Starting just as abruptly as that, day 1 starts with the main character staring straight ahead, out of the door of their claustrophobically small cell. Accompanied by little more than the ticking of the clock on the wall and the loud monotonous droning hums echoing throughout the building, you wait. Soon enough, you receive a letter under your door and a prompt to click on the letter. It is from a man named Salvador, a traveler and presumably a close friend of yours, who asks about your life in prison, and explains to you that he will be going on another one of his journeys into the unknown sometime soon. After waiting again, Salvador sends you another note, this time with a little friend, a bug who stays with you for the rest of the game. Quite soon after, you receive a letter from Dr. Money informing you that you have been selected to join an exclusive program. In the following letter, he tells you about a terrible virus that has been killing off presumably large portions of the population of the country you are in. While unfortunate, Dr. Money tells you there is still hope, as you are a part of the 2% of the population that is not yet infected with the virus. You are quickly assigned a happy buddy, given to you by Dr. Money to avoid you in fighting off depression and suicidal thoughts. Right on cue, your happy buddy sends you a bright blue envelope filled with 5 confetti poppers. After being prompted to use one of the confetti poppers, your happy buddy sends you 2 more letters, one of which contains a Game Boy style knockoff device that allows you to play Serpent, a game in which you control a serpent, through areas in order to eat an apple. After playing a couple levels, Salvador writes to you again, describing an interaction he had with a nice woman, which is soon followed up with another letter detailing a beautiful, peaceful, and quiet lake. Salvador then asks you, have you ever been so alone that you cannot convince yourself of the fact that other people exist anymore? And he gives you a painting, one that has always reminded him of the spirit of traveling, in hopes that it will liven up your cell. Shortly after, your happy buddy writes to you again, singing you a song in one letter, and then hoping you will always keep a song in your heart in another, and reminding you of how smart, kind, and important you are. Your first clue that things are not quite what they seem, though, appears when Dr. Money accidentally sends a letter addressed to Mr. Smiley, who is revealed to be your happy buddy, to you instead, in which you learn that Mr. Smiley is expected to meet a happiness quota and lower the suicide rates in prison, in exchange for which he will be able to see his daughters again. The situation is quickly remedied when Dr. Money sends you another letter, telling you that the previous letter was sent to you accidentally, and that your happy buddy really does like you. Mr. Smiley's letter, sent right after that interaction, is 4 lines of laughing, and then him asking how you are. He answers for himself and tells you he's feeling great, and reassures you that you really are his bestest, friendliest, happy friend in the whole wide world. And as the light from your window slowly gets darker, you realize your first day is over, and you are greeted by a final letter from Salvador, wishing you good night. You are then prompted to go to bed, and day 2 begins. Starting just as abruptly as day 1, day 2's first letter comes from Mr. Smiley, graciously reassuring you of his own good night's sleep and wishing that yours was good as well. You are then given a second game for your portable entertainment product dubbed Fear of Fire, in which you control a spider eerily similar to the one crawling around your cell as you attempt to dodge various flames as a timer counts down to 10 in the background. Survive all 10 seconds, you make it to the next round. Pretty simple. You are then contacted yet again by Salvador, happy to tell you about his trip north, denoting it as his favorite cardinal direction to head in. He tells you of a river, and a sign stating that the river's water is known to change direction, something that piques his interest. Pondering on the little things he has enjoyed in life, Salvador's curiosity could not be tamed, and he chooses to stay and wait for the river to change directions. After this, you're given your third gift from Mr. Smiley, a pleasant poster that will remind you to smile. Beautiful, isn't it? You are then greeted by a completely new envelope, complete with new handwriting and a new writer as well. You are informed that it seems that you and the sender of the letter are the only people in town still not infected with the virus. An owner of the local pastry shop, the sender implores you of their inability to sell their pastries to anybody except for you. They ask that you come visit them sometime, for a pastry and a cup of tea. The mysterious author reveals her name to be Charlotte, someone who will continue to send you letters throughout the rest of the game. Salvador writes to you again, eager to share with you his amazement in watching the rivers change in direction, recounting his love of seeing new and amazing things. After what seems like an eternity, Charlotte contacts you once more, apologizing for coming off as too forthcoming in her earlier letters, informing you of how she hasn't been in contact with people anymore, and she asks for your forgiveness in the instance that she may have made you uncomfortable. Mr. Smiley, always a ray of positivity, writes you a letter and hopes you're enjoying your 2 expensive games, emphasizing how expensive they were. Despite this, Mr. Smiley has a good laugh about the situation and asks you politely not to be sad. Following this up with a note about knowing how hard it must be to be all alone in your cell, Mr. Smiley continues to aid you by telling you you must remain happy. Please. Dr. Money then writes to you, telling you that his team has noticed the odd behavior of your happy buddy, reminding you that you can always have your happy buddy replaced if you say the word. The ever-aware Mr. Smiley tells you he's heard of other inmates reporting their respective happy buddies to Dr. Money before quickly reassuring with you that you would never let that happen, right? He apologizes for not having another game for you, as he doesn't have the money for it at the moment, and he apologizes, again and again. Salvador then writes to you, asking you about your bug friend, and asks you to reminisce with him about sitting by the fireside, carving chess pieces out of wood without a care in the world, noting how long ago that time was. Commenting on his own now noticeably worse wood-carving skills, Salvador promises to make you something, and delivers the very first part, a singular wooden leg of a table. Charlotte writes to you one more time, commenting on the nice evening and hoping you have a nice sleep. Unable to respond, you go to bed. And at the beginning of day 3, you were woken yet again by Mr. Smiley's letters this morning with promises of good news. He tells you he has gotten you a new game with the last of his money. The game is Piteous Moonlight, in which you control a winged blob as you attempt to reach a green triangle at the end of a long path. Mr. Smiley happily tells you not to worry about him spending all of his money, assuring you that he's okay. All he truly asks for is that you stay happy for him, and the love of all that is holy. Stay happy. They're watching. You are then told of how quiet the world has become. Charlotte continues, informing you of some sort of antidote that Dr. Money has started selling, but that she doesn't trust. Forced to remain in her shop, watching the townsfolk choke to death, Charlotte tells you that as much as the loneliness pains her, she must remain inside. Salvador gives you the second leg of your table and asks you as to whether or not it is time for him to end his journey, not knowing how dangerous that choice is. Mr. Smiley writes to you about the hard nature of the games you have been sent, and talks about the incidents of other inmates getting upset at their own games. He's quick to remind you, however, that it isn't about the games, but rather happiness. And what better way to make someone happy than with a gift, as Charlotte sends you a poster she found in her attic, remarking that she hoped it would cheer you up, despite the general unpleasantness of it. But what other better way to make someone happy than to remind them not only of how busy you are, but to also remind them of how fine everything is? Dr. Money must not know, as this is all his letter entails. It seems as though you were not the only recipient of that letter, however, as Charlotte writes to you, asking if you also received the previous letter. She comments on his ignorance of the people suffering and tells you of the insanely high price his antidote is being sold at. Soon after, you receive the third leg of your table from Salvador, who excitedly tells you that he has started his journey home, reminiscing about the familiar faces he cannot wait to see. Charlotte tells you about the ill effects of the doctor's antidote, stating that it causes various vital organs to fail, and telling you that people are dying not only from the virus, but the cure as well. Lamenting that most of her cakes have gone bad, Charlotte wishes that she could come visit you, unable to bear the burden of being alone for much longer. In her next letter, Charlotte figures that you can't respond to her letters, hoping that the letters are getting delivered at all, before posing the question, are you even still alive? Soon after, Salvador, now going by the title of Master Woodworker, sends you the fourth leg of your table, promising you that the final part will arrive shortly. You are then told by Mr. Smiley that more and more inmates are killing themselves, asking you not to kill yourself for both of your sakes. And arriving just before bedtime, Salvador's letter contains the final piece of the table, reveling in his accomplishment by telling you that you finally have something to put all of your stuff on, before questioning if you even have anything to put on it in the first place. And just like that, day 3 is over. The 4th day starts, and you are greeted by a letter from Salvador, telling you of how excited he is to feel the smell of his hometown again. His journey has come to an end, and he is nearly home. You wait in anticipation of his next letter, having dreaded for days for this moment, not knowing what Salvador will say upon seeing his town, his people, in ruin. With no greeting, with no stories, nothing. Your eyes scan the letter. 3 words, a question mark. All he says is, "Where is everyone?" But you cannot answer. You are then contacted by Mr. Smiley, telling you that he has sold his house, his food, and one of his lungs. He says not to worry, and gives you a new game, just so you can be happy. It is called Triangle Wars, a quick time reaction game in which you must press the correct button to get past one of 3 obstacles. Soon after, Charlotte writes to you, recalling a time when the streets of her hometown were lively, but now she denotes they have fallen silent. She then tells you about a gramophone in her basement, before pondering if it is time to break the silence. Relieved to see another letter from Salvador, the relief you feel is short-lived, as a devastating picture of the world outside is painted before you. He asks if you know about what is going on outside. The virus. The organs. The blood. And then you are given confirmation. Confirmation of a theory you had led yourself to believe long ago. A letter from Dr. Money reveals that he was the one who created the virus. In a letter apologizing for any inconveniences that may have arisen because of it, accompanying the letter is a framed picture of Money, adorned with the text, "Money survives all hardships." Salvador writes, "People are dying. The organs are failing because of an antidote for the virus, and everyone is infected. I wonder if I am too." He follows up with a letter discussing the huge market for working organs, as people are running to buy Dr. Money's organs, but Salvador knows they are not what they seem. Those that use the organs, he continues, die within a few hours. He questions where they came from, what they are, and if any of it even matters anymore, before asking you if you are infected as well. Charlotte then writes to you, asking you how much of the world you can hear in your cell, and how high up you are. You can almost imagine her voice. She figures she'll never know, and simply tells you to listen closely. And then, you hear Charlotte's gramophone. In music. For 40 wonderful seconds, you delight in the sound of anything but the horrible drones, the silence, the deafening silence you have been cursed to live with for 4 days. That horrible, never-ending silence that has taunted you, disturbed only by the monotonous beeps of your games, is broken by true music. And just as quickly as it started, it stops, and the all-too-familiar silence creeps back into your cell. Charlotte asks if you could hear it up there. She played it extra loud just for you, knowing how important music is in times like these. Still, she remains alone. She wonders if she should play it again, but resists, as any subsequent plays would never be the same as that one magical moment. That one moment in between all of the dreary ones. She tells you this cannot go on forever. She is unable to count how many people have died. She tells you she is too afraid to look. She is unable to see anything outside of the confines of her storefront window. She says she sees nothing but blood, that she is all alone, and that everyone is dead. She tells you that the city's lights are going out. It is out of electricity, and that the only lights she sees come from your prison. One more day, tomorrow evening. She tells you that you must go there, that she will wait for you, that if you cannot come, the world has no place for her anymore. She gives you a cake. Salvador then asks you if you heard that wonderful music, and that he attempted to find it, but it was stopped before he could get to it. He finds an empty apartment to sleep in, and tells you that he must see you again. He tells you that you must still be in that cell, all alone, before promising to come visit you. Mr. Happy writes to you, asking if you are playing your games, asking if you're happy. He tells you he is happy, but tired, and that you both must sleep. And that tomorrow, it will all end. You wake up, not quite knowing if today will truly be the final day that you spend in this wretched cell, but forcing yourself to believe that it has to be. Immediately, Mr. Smiley writes to you, putting on his fake persona for the last time, before dropping it. It is then that Mr. Smiley tells you that he isn't your friend, that he never was, and that he has been forced into helping you by Dr. Money, who had kidnapped his daughters. Misled by false promises of safety for his daughters if he could keep you happy, Mr. Smiley agreed until he found out that he had been lied to. And then your eyes read 4 simple words. My daughters are dead. Mr. Smiley tells you that they died 2 days ago, and that he was never able to say goodbye. Unlike them, however, he says that he will be able to say goodbye to you. He tells you not to lose hope, as he has, and that he has another game. Even though he doesn't have the money for it, Mr. Smiley decides to sell off the last of his organs for money up front in order to pay for the game, claiming that he must finish what he started. He knows he won't survive, but he knows that isn't important. He confides in you that the only thing that is important is that you are still healthy, and you can't lose hope. After begging you to keep going, and to not give up like he has, he sends you his final letter. Goodbye. The final game is Crankmaster. You use the arrow keys to turn a cog until the level is over. It is slow, it is monotonous, it is work, digital labor, a task to perform with no end goal. You sit in silence. Mr. Smiley is gone, but just a few seconds later, a letter from Dr. Money slides into your room. It reminds you to be happy and that you are loved. You are worth every penny, they remind you. Salvador then informs you that the town is dead, that there is simply nobody left, and that he is all alone, but on his way. He believes he is close to your cell, and he tells you that he is looking forward to seeing you again, before wondering to himself if you are even still alive. He wonders if he's writing to a dead man before asking you if a little virus really could kill you. Alerted by Salvador's letters, Dr. Money asks you to ignore Salvador's writings in the future because of his measurably free spirit. Dr. Money then reminds you how you are being taken care of, protected from the virus, before reminding you not to forget that you are a prisoner. Salvador then tells you he can see your prison, estimating that it should only be an hour or two walk from there, before committing to his goal that he will free you upon his arrival. Dr. Money doesn't like this, and he tells you that Salvador cannot be here, and that he doesn't appreciate how he talks, nor how he talks about your freedom. This is no joke, he tells you. Cease all contact. Salvador's next letter announces his arrival, before he asks you the location of the cell, as well as where his previous letters have been sent to. He remarks that he is unable to enter the building and that the door is locked. He breaks in, but is unable to operate the elevator or find a set of stairs. He tells you it is getting late, and that instead of him getting up to you, perhaps you could come down to him. It is now when Salvador contacts you with a revelation that this building was never meant to be a prison. He notes the bottom floor's lack of cells and the plans for the building lacking cells entirely. He figures Dr. Money repurposed the building just to imprison you, commenting on how pointless that would be. Salvador is able to figure out the lock to your cell door is powered by electricity, meaning that if he can destroy the generator, you will be freed. While he looks for the generator, Charlotte writes to you, simply asking you if you are coming to meet her. She begs you to come, before sending you her final 2 letters. "I'm sorry, friend," she writes. "I'm sorry" is written on the last blood-soaked letter, the last one you will ever receive from Charlotte. As you sit in despair, all hope is not lost. Salvador tells you he has found the generator, and that all that is left is for him to destroy it. He tells you to meet him at the entrance, and that he cannot wait to shake your hand once again. It is then you hear a jolt of electricity, the power turns off, and a red light illuminates your cell. Your door is opened. Salvador has freed you. It is just then that Dr. Money reveals to you that Salvador was electrocuted in the process. "Your friend is dead," he writes to you. They all are. Dr. Money tells you that even though your door is open, leaving will accomplish nothing. The town is dead. You and him are the last ones left. There is nothing for you out there. He promises to send someone to fix the generator, and that you will be able to live out your days playing games without a care in the world. He promises to even tell you why you're here, reminding you that you'll never know that if you leave. He tells you can do anything, as long as you don't open that door. A timer appears, giving you 30 seconds to make your choice. The door opens. You are greeted by a hallway of white doors, each one locked. As you turn the corner, you see a window consumed in darkness, and a pad with up and down buttons on it. You pick it up and eventually return to your room. You are prompted to install the elevator buttons. You decide to go down. The door closes and your cell accelerates downward, passing floor and floor, only getting faster. As you enter a free fall, passing hundreds of floors as the drones of the prison get louder and louder, you are unsure if you will make it out alive. Your cell stops suddenly, and the door opens. You walk out and turn the corner. 2 doors stand in front of you. Your exit, the world, Charlotte. You're prompted to leave the building. Outside, you see the moon, while the rest of the town, save for one building, is shrouded in darkness. As you approach it, you read the sign posted above the door. Charlotte's Delicious Pastries, with a singular cake in the window and a closed sign on the door, blood splattered on the wall behind the counter. You open the door and approach the counter. Behind it is Charlotte's final letter. To my only friend, when you're reading this, I will already be dead. My shop will probably look quite messy. I have decided that I'll go to the back room to die, so you don't have to look at my corpse. I'm sorry I couldn't be more patient in waiting for you. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're here. Against all odds, you managed to escape the prison. I'm aware that this may seem like a bad ending to this story, but you're here. You're here, and I've baked another cake for you. I'm not sure how fresh it will be when you find this. As for all I know, you never will. But I hope you enjoy it anyway. I wish you the best of luck. Charlotte. In the next morning, you are shown Charlotte's bakery. Then the prison with power once again. The window of Charlotte's bakery with no cake. And finally, your cell. As the camera pans up to the now open room, your bug friend scuttles around before escaping. As the game's end screen fades in. The end. Alright, so now that all of Presentable Liberty has been laid out before you, I think it's time to go a little bit deeper in depth into the game's actual gameplay, or lack thereof, its atmosphere, story, and overall themes, all of which I believe come together incredibly well in this disturbingly impactful 1-hour experience. Now, admittedly, Presentable Liberty's gameplay is almost non-existent, but that is in no means a bad thing. It is clear from the get-go that this game is meant to deliver a story and not really gripping gameplay. If anything, the gameplay is almost meant to be boring, something that you want to escape from just as bad as the character you play as does. Yes, you are given very small, simple games to toy around with when you get bored, but after a few levels they get challenging, almost like they weren't meant to be someone's only form of entertainment, which I believe is entirely by design. The tedious games serve as an in-between to the actual meat of the game, the letters in the story. While it may seem like just a poor excuse for what is sometimes excruciatingly boring gameplay, the point of this game is to make you feel trapped, to make you feel like a prisoner. This isn't a game where you're supposed to have fun, and I think that the gameplay does an excellent job of driving that home, even if it can lead to a less than desirable experience for certain players. Unfortunately, the lack of gameplay does lead me to it not really having much more to say about it than that for now, but it is definitely something that it does incredibly well by design, and I will be sure to mention it when discussing the atmosphere and themes later on. As for the story, this is where Presentable Liberty really shines. It is compelling, impactful, and is solely delivered epistolarily, something I believe is entirely unique to this game. Perhaps one of the only video games to be presented in the epistolary format, meaning that the entire story is conveyed entirely through letters, either written or read by the main character. In Presentable Liberty, these letters are only ever read by the main character, and you are unable to ever write anything back or get an understanding of what the main character that you play as is thinking or feeling, leading to everything you're experiencing coming as a result of the thoughts of others, whether it be Salvador, your adventuring buddy, Charlotte the lonely baker, Mr. Smiley, your happy buddy, or Dr. Money, the man keeping you prisoner. Each of these characters serve the plot in different ways, making the overarching story of the game and each of these characters' respective involvement with you, as well as each other, all the more interesting. The simple fact that these characters are at the very least aware of each other, with some of them being in more direct contact than others, makes the world as a whole seem much more fleshed out. From Mr. Smiley being under direct orders from Dr. Money to Salvador and Charlotte almost interacting, every time one character mentions another feels like the story becoming even more tightly knit and connected, leaving you to figure out how, if at all, these characters will come together. Of the four, Mr. Smiley might be my favorite character, as from the get-go you can tell that he's only there to distract you, to keep you from going crazy, which you are pretty much told as such in a letter accidentally sent to you on day one from Dr. Money, in which he is addressing Mr. Smiley and reminding him that he has to lower the prison's suicide rates. Speaking of, Dr. Money serves the plot as an antagonist, an almost omnipresent force for evil, characterized almost entirely by greed and lust for power. From the beginning, you know he can't be trusted, something that is only made increasingly apparent through his increasingly antagonistic letters, as well as the suspicions from characters like Charlotte and Mr. Smiley. Charlotte seems like a reflection of the main character. She, too, is locked inside, and while you have at the very least games to play and letters to read, all she has is you. Someone she doesn't even know is alive or dead. But to her it doesn't matter. All she needs to know is that she is writing these letters, that there is a chance that someday her loneliness will end. And last but not least, there's Salvador, your close personal friend that is completely oblivious to what is actually going on throughout the entirety of Presentable Liberty, as he is busy taking in the sights and sounds of the countryside on a personal trip for most of it. This serves the game incredibly well, as while he is out exploring, all you can think about is what may happen to him upon his return, and even when he does get back, his letters are haunted by this unsettling aura which becomes more and more apparent as he writes to you about the blood on the streets, then the completely empty buildings and houses, which just paints a picture in your mind of a once beautiful world now in ruin. And overall, it is through the letters sent to you by each of these characters that the story of Presentable Liberty unfolds. Each of them writes to you, and as they do, you begin to care for them, something that ultimately winds into a pit of absolute dread when you realize the fates that each of them will meet. While you wait in your cell, Salvador tells you of his wondrous travels and sends with his stories parts for a table that will eventually be constructed in your room, all while you fear for his safety upon his eventual return. Charlotte writes to you in hopes to cure her loneliness, reflecting on the horrors she sees through her windows, which is something she writes about often, while asking herself if she should just go outside and succumb to the illness. All the while, Mr. Smiley is clearly unhappy, forced to do as Dr. Money pleases, while the doctor himself sits upon his throne of disease-ridden, lifeless corpses. And while the story itself is impactful and powerful on its own, it is something that I only think hits as hard as it does because of how it is presented to the player. Because of the wait that is required between every letter, you are forced to simply wait and read, and while the games help you pass the time, they just don't do much when you're caught up on every last word of the most recent letter to reach your doorstep. As mentioned before, the connections between characters is what really helps build the world and expand it beyond the walls of the four characters that write to you. It is through Charlotte that you learn that Dr. Money might not be as good-intentioned as he seems, and Mr. Smiley's letters on later days do nothing but confirm this in your mind, creating the narrative that Dr. Money released a plague upon the world only to then sell an even deadlier medicine. These events are never seen by the player, but told to them by Charlotte, who is one of the most relevant characters in the whole story, and one that is always just out of reach of the player. While Charlotte gets you deeply entrenched into Dr. Money's web, however, Salvador tells you about the outside world, and he furthers Charlotte's impact not only on the player, but on the world around her when Salvador writes to the player about the wonderful music he heard. That letter where he wishes the music could play for just a bit longer so he could find the source Coupled with Charlotte's letters where she debates playing it again but decides against it as she believes it to be pointless, is one of the most tragic story beats in the whole game, as the player knows how lonely Charlotte is and how close she had come to finding somebody. In the following days, the story accelerates rapidly. You are told that Day 5 will be different, and that everything will come to a head. Salvador will come rescue you, you will get to see Charlotte, and Mr. Smiley will unveil his mysterious plan. Ultimately, each of these characters meets a gruesome, unfortunate fate. Mr. Smiley learns that his daughters were dead, and in his final letters confesses he never got to say goodbye to them, but he will not let that be the same case with you, as he will sacrifice himself to give you one last present. In Salvador's attempts to free you, he accomplishes his goal, but at the cost of his own life, giving it up so you can be free. And the most tragic end was for Charlotte. She simply couldn't wait any longer. If you had just been a bit sooner, she could have seen you, but it was just too late. And in the end, you are all that is left. And then, the game ends. Ultimately, the game's story is left as a mystery. You and Dr. Money are all that remain. You are free now, but who knows where you will go, or if you'll even survive. The story as a whole is just told incredibly well, and is made that much better thanks to the game's incredible, as throughout this game, an incredible atmosphere is constructed around you. Through the visuals and the audio of the game, you are beaten down and immersed into the dreary world of Presentable Liberty. You are in a cell for the entire game, save for at most 2 minutes at the very end. Trapped in a small cell, walls adorned by unsettling posters, a small bug, and a table, you have next to nothing. The quality of the art style is almost disorienting. The mismatched tiles on the door, the thing you spend probably most of the game looking at, is just taunting you, as you are unable to open it. The rest of the cell does nothing but remind you of how cramped and miserable you are, with each adornment you put on the wall somehow making the walls seem like they're closing in on you, reminding you that you're just a prisoner in this dark, depressing world. The sounds of the game are truly something else. The ticking of the clock, the droning hums of the impossible building you're stuck in play on loop for the entire hour you're stuck here. Your only reprieve from the never-ending silence being a small victory chime from your portable entertainment product, and in that the sound itself is the reward. It is the smallest escape from an indifferent building in a silent world. And without a doubt the most impactful use of audio throughout the entire game is when Charlotte plays the song Eiffel Tower by Kevin MacLeod on her gramophone, at last breaking the deafening silence that has consumed the world around her. It is one of the best moments in the entire game, and it lasts just over half a minute, and in that time span you feel as if you are free from the prison, from Dr. Money, from his evil virus, until you are brought all too soon back to your cell, back to the dark, dank world and the horrible gray prison cell walls that have been constructed around you. The atmosphere that this game is able to create through a single cell and an almost entire lack of real sound is incredible, and it's just another one of the game's innumerable strengths. As for the themes presented in Presentable Liberty, they are beautifully uplifted and brought to a staggering new height thanks to everything I mentioned before. The story, the characters, the gameplay, the visuals, and the sounds of this game all go incredibly well with the game's main themes, those primarily being power and control, what it means to be alive, and greed, at least in my mind. Each of these are handled incredibly well, and I'll go into detail exactly why. First off, power is something that is immediately and completely stripped from the player once they start up the game. You are left to sit in your cell waiting for the next letter to arrive through that slot. It's not for a little while that you are given anything to do, which comes in the shape of your personal entertainment product, which slowly develops an overwhelmingly tedious and boring catalog of infuriatingly difficult and increasingly pointless games. Furthermore, your lack of power is something that is only emphasized throughout the entirety of the game. Mr. Smiley begs you to stay happy and remain positive as you stay locked inside of a cell. Charlotte wants nothing but to have you come out of your cell and meet her, seemingly forgetting that you are a prisoner, unable to make the choice to leave your confines and befriend her. Salvador contrasts the main character perfectly, as he is given the choice to go anywhere and do anything, joyously spending the time traveling the countryside while you are forced to waste away in your cell. All the while, Dr. Money revels in this fact, never missing an opportunity to remind you that while you must stay happy, that you're his prisoner, unable to leave. The way that the game conveys to you how unable to change anything you are is amazing, and it drives the message into your head that you are nothing, that you can't do anything, which only makes the end of the game that much more satisfying. When you open that door and disobey Dr. Money, you are granted a freedom that you simply haven't experienced before throughout the entire game. It feels like you're taking your life back, only to find yourself in Charlotte's shop looking at the bloodstains that lead to the back room. And as her final letter is being shown to you, you're reminded once again of how you were once again powerless to stop her from ending her own life. The game gives you everything you thought you wanted, only to rip it right back away from you as you're left to imagine what Charlotte's body looks like in that back room. Speaking of, it is incredibly important to the theme of what it means to be alive that Charlotte nor Salvador ever actually see or know that you're alive. And while Dr. Money and Mr. Smiley both know that you are alive throughout the game's runtime, it's important that they never interact with you directly either. What I mean is that you only know that the main character is alive because you're playing as them. Many times throughout the story, Charlotte and Salvador wonder to themselves if you're even still alive, but many of their actions point to the idea that they never really thought you were dead. I believe that this is because they couldn't think you were dead. What would their letters have been for? What would Salvador's sacrifice have been for if they didn't truly believe you were still there, and that you had gotten their letters? Even if you hadn't been alive, that wouldn't have changed anything for them, and it is because of that that this game challenges what it means to even be alive at all. Salvador and Charlotte wrote to you. They believed you were alive with absolutely nothing to have led them to that belief. You were at the very least an idea. You were something they could hope for, something they wanted to be with, and I think that that will come to be very important near the end of this video. What it means to be alive isn't just being alive, it's the ideas you inspire in people. It's what those people can do just knowing that you're out there that really shows how important someone can be. Charlotte waited for you. Salvador died for you, and whether or not you were even alive wasn't what mattered to them, but having something to strive for did, and that's what you were able to be for them. You were hope, and you were alive. Lastly, greed and desire for power is truly what makes anything in the game even happen at all. Dr. Money is consumed by this desire and his bid for power and money. He is consumed by this sickness that manifests itself in the plague that he releases upon the world. This is only made worse through his organ-destroying antidote and artificial organs, which do nothing but make the people sicker and sicker, and all the more desperate to give him their money. Contrasted against Dr. Money's lust for money is how indifferent to it everyone else in the story is. Salvador needs nothing but beautiful sights and adventure, Charlotte desires to be around friends and family, and Mr. Smiley gives up everything to acquire money to spend on the player, only after learning that his 2 daughters had passed away. No one else throughout the story is shown to have as much of a desire for money as Dr. Money himself, something that was clearly intended. This game asks the question what someone is willing to do to satiate their greed, and if all the money in the world could ever truly be enough. It has to be assumed Dr. Money has almost all of it, if not all of the money in the world, given the sheer ruined state all of it's in, as well as the complete absence of everybody else in the world besides himself at the end of the game's story. Overall, this game's themes are conveyed incredibly well and are truly taken to a new level thanks to the game's story, atmosphere, and gameplay. I simply don't believe they would be as impactful if this game had come out any other way. It's truly a masterpiece, and I think it's about time that we wrap this up. Before we do, however, I think it's time we talk about this game's creator. The man responsible for what is unquestionably one of my favorite, maybe not games, but definitely gaming experiences and stories that I've ever had the pleasure of engaging with. Robert Brock, known as Whirlpool Online, was an Austrian video game developer who had developed and released several independently produced games, his most popular being Presentable Liberty, Acceptable Money, and Menagerie Archive, all of which make up the totality of the Menagerie series. Without him, these incredible games would have never been created, and it is in memory of Robert Brock that I am creating this video and hoping to cover his story with the utmost respect. Robert Brock had created these games as a hobby and as a passion. Their rise to insane internet popularity was no doubt something he was insanely proud of. Unfortunately, after 3 Kickstarters he had created with the intention of funding remakes of both Presentable Liberty and Acceptable Money, both of which promised enhanced gameplay, new features, and developer commentary, Robert Brock took his own life as a result of what he believed to be failure. And I don't know if doing this video will do Robert Brock the justice he deserves, but I needed to put my immense appreciation out there on the internet as a tribute to him, his work, and how much he has inspired me. His games were incredible and dealt with heavy topics such as suicide and depression, and it pains me to think that Robert too felt alone, trapped, and unable to break free from his own struggles. Nevertheless, he was able to craft an incredible experience, and I want it to be one that people are able to interact with for years to come. I don't want him to be forgotten. Not him, not his games, not his creations. He deserves to be remembered. Robert Brock is an incredible inspiration for me, not only in the world of independent video game development, but content creation in general. and just simply with how to put yourself and your work out there, and without him I'm unsure if I would have ever started delving into this passion of mine, or looked into seriously having a future in video game development for myself, and I truly cannot thank him enough for his ideas, his games, and everything that he had done throughout his time on the internet. So thank you, Robert Brock. You will never be forgotten. May you rest in peace, and may your legacy live on as an inspiration for others. Thank you. Presentable Liberty is a powerful game, and I really hope that I've been able to demonstrate that and how it achieves its impact throughout this video. And I will absolutely not hesitate to say again how amazing Presentable Liberty is. It is short, it is sweet, it is sad, and it has one of the most engrossing worlds of any game that I've ever played. And what's more is that it is able to create this world while confining you to a one-room cell, with not even a transparent window to look out of. Ultimately, everything about this game just comes together into a wonderful, emotional, and downright oppressive experience that I really don't think I'll ever forget anytime soon. Just thinking back on certain letters, even my first playthrough of this game, simply because of how interested I was in the low-quality art style, I found it so charming and was so excited to see that it was so easily accessible. I'll definitely be sure to leave the link to the game's Game Jolt page in the description, so any of you can check it out if you'd like, as I truly believe everything just hits that much harder when going through the game yourself. If you have the time, please check it out, and before this video ends, I want to thank you. Truly thank you for watching this video, all the way up until the very end. It absolutely means the world to me. Anybody would be interested in hearing me ramble on about an old game that I have such a deep appreciation for this long. So thank you, viewer, and if you want to click that subscribe button and wait around for the next video I spit out, it'd be really appreciated, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Thank you again for watching, and thank you, Robert Brock.